Welcome, everybody. Thank you all for being here. It's been a long time. I'm going to start with a very brief update on streamlining efforts in clinical trials, including the different streams, including ethics review, contracts, etc. And I thought I would just frame it by starting about talking about the provincial work that's going on in this area, and then speaking briefly about CAN review, and then what our local office is doing to try and streamline things locally on the ground. So we'll just move on to the next slide. So in terms of RAP, I do get several questions coming in around what RAP is, where we're at with it. So I thought I would just briefly give an update here. So RAP is the Research Approvals Process Project. It's a provincially led MOH and health authority leaders initiative. It came about somewhat, got a lot of traction following the pandemic when there were difficulties with accessing data and samples for research. So that was the impetus that gave it a lot of interest and is driving it currently. So the purpose of that project is to improve the timeliness of research approvals in BC. There's multiple streams that the project is looking at, including ethics review, operational approval, contracts, privacy reviews, and data access. So you can see it's a pretty big project. We are approaching the 3-year mark. I think that's somewhat a testimony to how big of a project it is. The phase 1 deliverables for this project are now complete as of just a couple of weeks ago. And I can sort of briefly tell you what those were and then go on to tell you what the deliverables are for phase 2. So from the ethics review perspective, what's been done there is a business case has been developed for a central ethics service office in the province. I'm going to be honest, it's not terribly well defined yet what the governance of that would be, who would pay for this, what it would actually look like. I think frankly it's a ways away, but that business case is available for you to review if you'd like. I'm going to send out some links to both the RAP and CAN review projects following this meeting. So there is more information on that specific deliverable on the website. In terms of the operational approval process, what they did there is looked at all the different operational approval processes from the different health authorities and had a lot of working groups. Paula was very involved in that for Providence Research. So looking at, some forms were 20 plus pages long. Providence Research or Providence doesn't even have a form, so there was great variability in what that initial operational intake form looked like. What they settled on after speaking with all the health authorities and getting everyone to pare it down to what is essential for everyone is a 4-page form, I believe, Paula. So it's 4 pages long. It's literally hot off the press as of last Friday. We're still figuring out at Providence where this is going to fit into our process, considering we don't currently have an operational intake form, although the departments have their own. I think I'll just add that there is a concern and a push from PHC departments to be aware of the research that's coming to them earlier in the process. So that's happening. It just happens to be happening as this operational form has come into be. So we need to think about using it, even though initially we weren't going to, because it's coming from, nursing, pharmacy, some of the other really departments that are really impacted by research. They want to know about research requests earlier in the process. And I think most of you know that currently it's the REB application that triggers the operational approval process. So we're looking at ways to perhaps bring that into the review, like get those pending items out to you earlier in the process, but that's very early days in terms of what we're going to do there. In terms of the phase 1 deliverable for contracts, they did a fairly extensive review of everybody's sort of must-haves in a contract. They've come up with a contracts checklist that will be used across all health authorities with some pretty broad standardized language that will be used going forward. So that I think was a win there. Privacy. Privacy. The privacy review stream, not surprisingly to probably many in the room, has not advanced very far yet. So they're still in the phase of looking at how a health authority, interprets FRPRA in certain cases, and they're really figuring out now that is a huge piece of this. So not a lot of deliverables yet on that side of things. And I would say data access is kind of in that bucket too. So the planned activities in what they're now calling phase 2 going forward include, of interest to this group, I think for sure, is there's going to be a mandatory single REB review policy in the province. It's probably coming, I'm guessing that policy is going to be finalized over the next 3 months. And it's going to, for the UBC boards where we already accept each other's approval, like we wouldn't re-review something that PREV has reviewed or that BC Cancer has reviewed. But now that single review process is going to be put in place between health authority partners as well. So if PHC reviews something where Island Health and Interior are on it, they will no longer be looking at it in any way from a research ethics perspective. They will still, of course, need to do their own operational approvals, which is why that standardized intake form became of interest in the phase 1 work. And then what they're looking at next in terms of operational approval, I'm not entirely sure of the rationale, to be honest, behind this one, but they want to actually harmonize operational department forms across health authorities as well, so that, the labs asking the same questions at each lab. I've expressed my thoughts that this may not be practical, but they do want to start initiating conversations with the departments themselves. So our team won't be terribly involved in that. They want to just sort of use the office to make those connections so they can have those conversations. They may hear very loudly on the ground that harmonizing department forms is not feasible or desirable, but we'll leave that for them to figure out. And then the other big deliverable on the contract side for this year, a master CTA in the province. Yeah, so I think for phase 1, there's some really good work that was done on the contract side for sure. So I think that's a plus. And I think the single REB review will be welcomed by many, including our office for sure. We've always been a big proponent of direct reciprocity already. So for us, just making it mandatory, I think it actually simplifies things. But as you can imagine, there's some health authority policies that may need to be changed to allow for this legally in some of those other jurisdictions. So that's why we need some more time. There's going to be working groups put together to try and do this as quickly as possible. And then again, the privacy data access deliverable for the coming year, not as far along as the other streams. And again, probably not too surprising. So that's RAP in a nutshell. CAN review, I'm getting a lot of questions about CAN review as well. So the CAN review platform is a centralized system for REB reviews across the country. It definitely leverages the CTO platform, which is very well established. And the platform itself is one of the key initiatives of the Accelerated Clinical Trials Consortium, which is a pan-Canadian initiative to optimize and also streamline clinical research activity in Canada. And I think Erin might have something to add on that potentially in the question. Or did you want to add it?
I can add it now if you want. It's just that I was at the N2 board meeting last week and we asked Alex Lim from ACT to come and speak with us. And he was talking about the ACT master contract agreement, which they're also working on for the whole country. So apparently it's going to be released in June. So for any of us doing multi-center trials, hopefully this will facilitate a faster contract process. See,
And everyone's on board, or most institutions on board?
it seems like they're on board. I think we all want to do it. Now, I don't know if the lawyers at the institution are on board. That's the part I'm not sure of.
Okay, thanks, Erin, for that. So Can Review, the platform itself launched on Clinical Trials Day on May 20th. Right now, it's voluntary participations in the province, so provinces and institutions can elect to participate or not. I believe Alberta has some provincial legislation that does not currently allow for this, that they're looking at tweaking in order to be able to participate. And I think Quebec is the same. Is that correct? That's what I've heard, that Quebec and Alberta are kind of outliers that couldn't participate right now, unless there's some laws changed. Every other province can participate.
It's true for Quebec, they cannot participate.
Okay. Yeah. So in terms of how everyone feels on the UBC REB side of things, there's good support for our participation. We've had meetings internally and with the Can Review folks to talk about what this could look like. I don't think it's going to be an overnight process though, because in order to be a review board on the Can Review platform, you do have to be qualified. You have to be a qualified REB either through Clinical Trials Ontario or the HRSO model, which is more complex. But so our boards are certainly willing to go through that qualification process, but my understanding is that it does take some time, up to a year, I've heard, which I'll confirm that, but it's not an overnight. You know, they have to come out and go through all our documents and processes to qualify us. We are, however, before that happens, before we're qualified, we are able to participate as a non-lead site. So we wouldn't be able to be the primary board of record, but we could be a participating site on a study reviewed by a Can Review qualified REB. So we're looking at how soon we would be able to do that. I think the questions that we're coming up with and that UBC is also concerned about is there any way for this Can Review platform to talk to RISE or integrate in some way, or do researchers absolutely have to log into the Can Review platform? It looks like that will be the case. So there will be a new system for people. They'll have to have a separate login for that platform. At least that's what early signs are suggesting. And I think the other concern, more on the health authority side, is a lot of the operational approvals are dependent on what's in the RISE application. So where would that information now live in order for the operational approval process to happen? So that's that's another excuse me, area that we're talking about right now. And some of those other compliance pieces as well. So the COI, where's that going to live now if we don't have it? I think RISE, one of the issues with the RISE application over the years is that it's become too big and it contains too much that's outside of strictly the ethics review. So then when you go to have an opportunity like this, you realize how much you're relying on RISE for a lot of these other pieces outside of REB review. And then there's just the discussions about how long the qualification process would take, what the fee structure would look like. So if you're a lead board and then you're a participating site, how are those review fees dispersed? So there's a lot of those kind of practical questions to consider, but there's across the board support, at least at the UBC affiliated board side, to participate. So we will keep you updated on, what that is looking like internally. So as you can see, there's lots going on in the province and across Canada to streamline approvals. So I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about what the Providence Research team is doing on the ground to support and align with that work. So we've implemented a couple of new processes, and then we have some other ideas that we're thinking about that we'd love feedback on. So one thing that we've been doing on a voluntary basis right now for above minimal risk studies is Alex has been pre-screening them and sending them back to researchers for some more on the administrative side correction. Sometimes there's significant issues with consent forms and things to try and get the applications back in a cleaner state for the REB meeting so we can issue you less comments after the meeting and also get the comments out to you more quickly after the meeting. So we've got some preliminary data, which is really good. It's showing that when we take that extra step early on and researchers take advantage of that, it makes the post-meeting provisos much shorter and the time to approval is much quicker. So right now we're sort of making this a voluntary thing. We'll send the comments out and explain to people, this is why we're sending them now. This is why we're doing it. Some people do it. Some people come back and haven't done it. So, then they get the usual provisos after the meeting. But that's one thing that we're doing. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about Irene's new role, but we're also just thinking of making some applications that, we do with kind of the perfect wording in them to put them in our website. So you can just use that kind of template responses as much as possible. We're getting good traction from UBC for an abbreviated application for clinical trials. Again, the RISE application, there is a lot of pieces in there that you could argue are very specific to the academic world, and we could streamline the application itself for clinical trials. And it's good to know that they're supportive of our doing that. We're investigating the benefits of having a central ethics writing service. So specialists within PR who can do the ethics applications for high impact research studies. And we're sort of trialing this. We have an N of 1 in the CTU where we have used a very experienced person who kind of knows what needs to go in these applications. And I would say based on the review that you did on Friday of that application, yes, it was a success, our N of 1. So that's just something, and I don't know, I'd be interested in knowing, how many people would really like to get that part off their plate, or is this actually a part, does anyone enjoy this? So that's just something that we're thinking about. Could we expand that pool of people to help with this work, to just because there's great variability that comes in. We've got some people, we all know that it's typically not the PI doing this, so depending on the staff that you have, what shows up at the REB, I think you'd all be surprised if you could see sort of a view of what we see and how different the applications are one from another. And I always try to tell people that, timelines they're a shared responsibility between the REB office and the people submitting, right? So I always kind of frame it that if if we get 7 applications one day, in the morning, which can happen, and you're number 7 and 5 of the 6 above you are not in great shape, your time, even though your application might be perfect, your time to approval is now delayed because we're spending more time than we probably should or that you all would like us to on those applications that are not not in great shape. And I'm not being critical here. I'm just saying that, if you've got people on the ground who haven't been trained in this or they're doing a million other things as a research coordinator and don't have a lot of time to dedicate to it, it does impact timelines. So that's why we're looking at a central service and trying to gauge what the interest would be. So now I'm just going to move on to, this would be a good time to just reintroduce the REB office, because we've got a new role and some people doing new things since we last had a lunch and learn. So Alex is now the manager of the REB. So she's taken on a lot of my previous roles with management of the board, management of the staff. recruitment of members, in addition to all the reviewing work that she does. So she's your main contact now for the complex kind of things that come up. Paula Piper is our ethics review coordinator, although I think that's only half her title because she's also, she spends probably 50% of her time on facilitating the operational approval process for researchers. So we should probably look at your title, Paula, and update it. But she's also really picked up on ethics reviews as well, and is now regularly doing some of the minimal risk ethics reviews. And then our newest member, Irene Wan, she joined us a few months back. This is a new role for us. So this is the research ethics facilitator. We thought, it would be better to try and get at some of these issues up front than just hire another reviewer who's kind of dealing with the same issues that we've seen. So we hired a facilitator to do tailored consultations and education for groups to kind of get at that variability and experience. And Irene is currently the person that if we do get an application in that's just, got some work to do, and it rather than have Alex review it in detail, we're now putting it back to the researcher with an invitation to connect with Irene, who can help make it better for resubmission. So I think that's a really critical role. Mm-hmm. That role is also allowing us to have increased communication. So Irene's going to play a big role in our newsletter. We do have a newsletter that's ready to go, and we were waiting for. I know Susan, you're on the call. We were waiting to get a non-US provider for the newsletter platform, which I believe is now done. And Susan, maybe you can confirm that. So I think we're going to have one more look at it because it's been ready for a month or so, or maybe even 5 weeks.
Probably a bunch more stuff to add.
We're going to have a look at it and add anything that we think is important. We're also, Irene has drop-in hours, and then we're going to really try and maintain this lunch and learn schedule and maybe do some workshops, maybe invite some of you to help us with some of these things that we want to do. Like I think some tailored workshops around the abbreviated application for clinical trials, etc., would be helpful. So we'll put an invite out of the kind of work that we're doing, and if anyone would like to participate in that, that would be great. What else can I say about communication? Got anything to say?
I think so.
And then we're going to, through that increased communication channels, we are going to work hard to make sure that we disseminate new guidance and policies out to you as soon as we get them. They do tend to come out in bursts and flurries, so sometimes we're not always able, or we haven't been always able to get them out to you as quickly as we're getting them. So that will also be a big part of Irene's role to make sure that we're keeping you all up to date. And on that note, and it's a horrible thing to end with, but I'm in the spirit of increased transparency and rapid dissemination of information. The UBC REV fees will be going up to $5,000 for initial review and $1,500 for annual. And it really is in response to the increased complexity of the applications we're seeing. Everything has, or most studies now have a complicated genetic piece to them, or some of them have AI now that we don't even have policy around yet. So there's never, or very rarely, a single, also that there's just more work to do. And so the fees will be going up to try and offset some of that. I believe the communication will be coming out from UBC today, so that's why I wanted to tell you all here now. I think we have some flexibility on when we locally implement it. I think UBC the other boards might be shooting for September. I actually think that's a little early, so I think we'll plan what we think is gives people a little more of a runway, because we understand you might be already in discussion with sponsors and you may have already shared what the fees are, and now we don't want you to have to change your budgets and things. So we will look at a date that we think makes more sense. So really only sharing that because it's coming out later, and I don't want anyone to say, well, why didn't Julie say anything? So I think that's it for me.
Does anyone have any questions for Julie or the REBT before we
Yeah.
move on?
The facilitators for the REB applications, will they include ICF writers?
Well, you mean our future
Yeah,
pool of people?
The
Yeah. No, it would be the full, our goal eventually would be
Yeah.
to offer this service,
Yes.
right? And I think when you have people who've done this a lot and can, know our templates really well and utilize them and feel comfortable pushing back with sponsors to the degree that you can. We know sometimes they won't budge, but so yes, what we're trying to avoid is the consent form that shows up with clearly nobody's even looked at our template or our wording. So
Yeah,
at that point, you're kind of in a tough spot, right? And the only thing you can do at that point is send it back and talk to Irene, right? I mean, so eventually, yes, I think there's an argument. I think lots of institutions have that central writing as a service.
even just getting them, we have the template, then we have what we get from the sponsor and we have to mush them together. Yeah, that can be quite complex, so yeah, having someone to do that is definitely beneficial.
Yes, we see lots of creative examples of people taking our wording and then putting some other wording in there, and it gets sometimes, if they go together and they align, we can look at that, but when there's like one paragraph and the next one completely conflicts with it, that's when it's
Yeah.
kind of like, okay, this isn't working. So yeah, and I don't know how soon this can happen.
Yeah.
I think we want to check what the appetite is, because the phase 1 unit is we're not going to have a whole bunch of studies
Yeah.
right away. So I think it's a good opportunity to trial it there. So that's, get some metrics on it, albeit it's on a fairly small number.
We have a couple questions in the chat, but we do need to move things along a little bit.
Yes, sorry, I
right.
talked too long. Liz, yes.
Great question.
Yeah, that is a great question. Alex, you were at the meeting. I think the annual renewals for older studies will be grandfathered. won't they?
Totally, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely be grandfathered, and so
Yeah.
there would be no need to amend any budgets. But yes, VGH, any review that goes through CREB or the other UBC boards, including ones for VGH, would include that new contract fee. And I think UBC is implementing it for submissions that come in as of September 1st. So as Julie said, we're thinking about potentially delaying a little bit. But if there's a VGH study that you're thinking of in particular, if it's already in submission or will be submitted prior to September 1st, then there would be no increase.
Yeah, so similar, Liz, to how we did it when the last increase happened several years ago now. So the annual renewal rates were grandfathered from the previous studies. So you wouldn't have a situation where your old studies would have that increase.
Thank you. Sounds good.
Over to Shoshana. We had a request actually for just a general overview of the whole site clinical trial process. I think I'm not sure how many new people are actually on this call. I think we're mostly, for the most part, those that have been around a while, but so Shoshana and Leanne kindly put something together.
And this is basically just what we experience at Providence. It could be different at other sites. But the basic overview should be the same. So initially we're contacted by the sponsor. Now, usually a drug company, sometimes a device company. It's usually the PI knows somebody at one of these companies and they've done studies before and they say, would you like to do this study? And they start the initial process. We also get contacts from CRO. Sponsors hire outside third-party clinical research organizations that will take care of the studies for them. And then they set up a feasibility meeting. They want to know if you have the resources, if you have the staff, if you have the experience, if you have the patient population. And they'll go through a number of questions and to see if the site's a good fit. And usually the study design and the protocol has been developed by the sponsor. For grant studies or investigator-initiated studies, which we also do sometimes, the protocol and study design is done by the PI. We have a resource service here at Advancing Health that helps young researchers develop their own protocols if they want to do that. Those protocols would usually be funded by a grant from like CIHR or Michael Smith, whereas the other studies by the sponsor are funded by a drug company like AstraZeneca or Sanofi. Can we go to the next one, please? So basing this on a clinical trial with a drug company, the sponsor will get Health Canada approval for the drug or device that they want to study. And then when we've been selected as a qualified site, we will submit all the information they provide us to our REB. You know what the RISE application looks like, and you know what information needs to be submitted. The approval takes usually a few months. One of the time constraints that I find is the consent forms. The sponsor provides the consent form, and we will have our template. We will create the new consent form, send it to the sponsor. They will have to approve it before we submit it to the REB. So there's some back and forth there. One of the biggest things also with consent forms with sponsors here is that they don't understand as a Catholic hospital that we have to have restricted wording around birth control. And they usually provide very extensive wording. So there's a way of getting around it. Most of the sponsors know now. And we have documentation to provide to the sponsors if there's any questions. Usually at the same time, the contract is submitted to contracts. And negotiations are done. As the site study coordinator, I'm not involved with that. That's Jeff and Angela deal with that with the sponsor. And that can take, I've had a few that have taken a few years. So it depends on so many different parameters. Once we get that all going and you've got the REB in progress, the sponsor will usually set up an investigators meeting with the vendors where they actually take the several study teams through the entire study, including the third-party vendors that are used. Most studies now involve anywhere from 3 to 10 different vendors for collecting patient data, for patients usually using various equipment to help collect their data, and there's different, sometimes some studies require imaging, so you have to coordinate and know what you're doing for all those vendors, all the pieces that take place in part of the study. So please. Okay, so in order to start, we must have full REB and institutional approval. The REB part is the ethics approval, what we put into RISE, meaning all our forms are approved, all our advertising's approved, anything that we show the patients is approved. The institutional portion is getting approval from the various departments we work with. So you need approval separately from the lab, from ECG if you're using ECG, or imaging, or if you have to do lung function tests. Each department has to provide their own approval. You'll have to get all of that from each department as well before you can fully start. Full board review happens once a month, and there are usually changes to the application and consent form, usually due to privacy and safety. The REB usually asks us to add information to protect our patients. Yeah, so some of the departments you're going to require contracts because they're going to charge you, like the lab ECG. So you need approval and a contract with them. Usually as a study coordinator, you do the negotiating with them individually as opposed to the full study contract, which gets done through the contracts department. All of the contracts and institutional approvals can be done in consent together with while it's going the REB review. The goal is hopefully that everything is approved at the same time, approximately. Yeah, you also, if you need any access to Cerner medical records as well, these are all part of the institutional approval. Once everything's approved, you're going to have a site initiation visit. That means the REB approves you starting, and all the departments approve you starting, and the sponsor approves you starting. They deliver all the equipment you need, study medication or devices, documentation they require. They will usually send you a site file with all already laid out with all the paperwork for you to keep all the documentation you need in place. We'll have received all the training from all the different platforms, and once everything is complete, we get a go letter from the sponsor. So we can't actually start the study until we are initiated as a site with a go letter from the sponsor. So we've got training, we're going to start recruiting our patients. So most of our studies are drug studies that we do. They're double blind, placebo controlled. And so nobody knows what's going on or who is getting what, so that it decreases bias. Patient will come in for several study visits based on a predetermined schedule. You're collecting data to see the safety and effectiveness of the drug or the device, and give them more study medication. They report any changes and problems, and you collect questionnaires and collect anything else that the sponsor wants you to collect. Recruitment methods are need to be approved by the REB. There are a number of ways we can contact patients. We can put up posters. PHCRI has a website where we can advertise the study. Reach BC is, if you get REB approval, you can use the Reach BC to contact potential participants, and also contacting various community groups. You can also sometimes check patient records in Cerner if you're using a clinic or a PI that's directing you to use certain patients with certain disease process. You provide the patient with a consent form that has been approved, and you make sure they have at least 24 hours to read it and enough time to answer any questions. You really want to make sure that they are aware of everything. Informed consent needs to be informed. Best to give them to do it in person if possible, over the phone if not. And patients really need to know what's going on with them with the study, whether they're getting placebos, if the study has been, if the drug has been studied before, what the side effects and what potential things they can expect. And consent must be obtained before any study procedures are performed. We have studies that the first study visit requires people to withhold medication. So I don't want them withholding medication prior to them consenting to the study. First study visit is usually involves screening criteria, make sure that the patient meets all the requirements for the study. And they're usually basic blood work, physicals, ECGs, questionnaires, history, medication history. We want to make sure that they're appropriate and safe to participants for our studies. Next one, please. So the sponsor will lay out the procedures that are to be done during the study visits. The goal of these assessments are to determine if the study endpoints are being met. They want to make sure that their data is being collected properly, the data that they want is being collected. So we are monitored at a specific schedule depending on the protocol. To make sure of all these things, we'll have someone come in on site to review data. Sometimes they just do phone or virtual study visit just to make sure a few things are being done correctly for regulatory purposes. And they periodically have interim analyses, safety plans, which may involve stopping temporarily data collection or recruitment so that the study team, that the sponsor can complete all the information, assess what the needs are and if everything's going as planned. Okay, so once you complete all the study visits and all the data has been collected and cleaned, the database will be locked. At this point, the recruitment has been complete. They're not recruiting any more patients. They analyze the data. And will report on the results of the study, publish papers at abstracts or conferences, send it to regulatory agencies, especially if it's a drug that they're trying to bring to market. They will provide all the information they need to Health Canada. And they submit it to Health Canada. If Health Canada approves it, they can go to market. And then the sponsors often conduct post-market studies to assess the long-term safety and efficacy and make sure that all the results are provided to provide transparency for the drug. And then the sponsor will come and close you out, collect or arrange for you to send equipment back to where it belongs, collect any outstanding drug, make sure all the documents are there for archiving, and help you close out, prepare for the archiving of the study. The sponsor pays for the archiving. It's part of the negotiated budget. We usually box things up and have them archived at UBC. It used to be Iron Mountain until UBC developed their own archiving system. And as per Health Canada, clinical trials approved by Health Canada need to be kept for 15 years and made available for review. So having them at UBC is convenient so that we can get them when we need. Okay. And then there are a number of resources I've just posted. The common consent form template, our research services, the various labs and pharmacy that and contracts you might need to contact for any of the things you might need and the archiving.
Thank you.
Thank you. I can talk fast. I just want to show you pictures, really.
Okay. If you have any specific questions for Shoshana, please feel free to put them in the chat. And we'll make sure that we answer them. But we are running short on time, so.
I'll be quick. I have 5 minutes. So I'm sure everyone wants to see what the phase 1 unit looks like. We are almost there. Once the slides go open. So the phase 1 unit is located at Mount St. Joseph Hospital. It is an 8-bed unit, so we can take 8 patients at a time. We have the interim medical director is Dr. John Boyd, me as the operations manager. We also have Leanne helping us out on a part-time basis, and Danica, my right-hand woman, is there to do all the things as well. The aim is to be operational in June. It keeps moving, but we're waiting for permits, so it's not our fault. And the goal is to provide a space and opportunity for sponsors and investigators to do overnight phase 1 studies that are not cancer, because there's a cancer unit for that. Sorry, go back to the picture. Just wanted to show you the photo is what our beautiful research station will look like. So that is a room with all of the storage up top, with all the logs. It's very exciting. Okay, next slide. So what are we going to be doing? As I said, it's an overnight inpatient setting. So we're inside the hospital with rapid access to, critical care. We have crash card. We'll have buttons to call codes. We're going to be working with the high acuity unit at MSJ, working together with their nurses to provide care, as the nurses have to be on site if the patients are there. Basically, that's the hospital rule. And we're working alongside with pharmacy and lab and the clinical team to get all this done. And that is one of our rooms here in the picture. That is the 2-bedroom with lots of windows. It's lovely. Next slide. So the safety equipment, again, priority for phase 1 unit is safety of our participants. It is the first time drug is being tested in humans, so we need to make sure everyone is very, very safe. So to do that, we have continuous cardiac monitoring at every bed, a crash cart, vital sign machine, again, at each bedside table, bedside, as well as ECG machines are part of that whole system. We have a dedicated exam room. You can see here that is also acts as our lab. We have and then Omnicell, which is a drug cabinet that will be used for rescue medication. So we'll have a full set of rescue meds for common AEs like anaphylaxis and GI and things like that. So our lab equipment is all brand new. We have a -70, -20 freezers, a fridge, a regular sample fridge, all the storage, as I said, and a refrigerated centrifuge to process central labs and ship them off. So the amenities for participants, again, as I said, there's 8 beds, two are in 3-bedroom rooms and 1 in 2-bedroom room. There's a lounge, there's a kitchenette you can't see on the side of the picture with a fridge and sink and stuff. There will be more pretty pictures and stuff. This is just, we're gonna make it prettier. And then there's 2 washrooms with 2 showers and 3 toilets, all in total for the unit. The services we'll be providing are full service from, sponsors come to us and we do everything as Shoshana was just describing, from sponsor contact to archiving. We'll be doing ethics, admissions, contracts, staffing, all of that fun stuff, and also recruitment. Next slide is the recruitment slide. So we have a database built in by ReachBC for healthy volunteers.
if anyone wants to participate. There's the QR code. We actually have approval to distribute these postcards in various community places, so we'll be doing that shortly. Currently, we actually already have about 180 participants signed up, so very exciting. Yeah, so we're looking for healthy people to sign up. That is it, I think. Yeah. You contact.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.